or the Metabolic Triad or Biocircuits Network Connectivity Seminar. A lot of people are talking about network connectivity and interconnectedness nowadays. I think we started doing this seminar almost a decade ago, and it really provided a lot of value to the docs and other healthcare professionals. And I've been in touch with a lot of them over the years, and they're like, this is the way we look at people now. Is that you have to get somewhere with somebody quickly, and you got to decide where you need to start. I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. Yesterday, I'm in my clinic, and somebody came in, and they literally had a stack, I am not exaggerating, 6 inches thick of lab tests. And I mean everything from microbiome to mycotoxins to organic acids to toxic metals. They had a stack. They'd been to multiple providers. And in the end, she was taking about 40 different bottles of product. And the bottom line is that there was no organization to where she needed to start in order to get the beginnings of feeling better, and leaving her frustrated, searching out the next great doc without really saying, okay, this is where your problem is to start. This is what we're going to work on. We're going to try and get these things corrected, and then we're going to move on to the next thing, so that the person understands what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that you have a clearer, simpler explanation for what's going on for their chemistry. And that was the whole genesis of creating this 20A module back 8, 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago at this point. And we also, created a lot of case work on this. So when you go through 20A, you get cases gone over in class, and then you break off and do cases. So this is a really big practicum. So let's talk about this and what the objectives are for this weekend. One is, examine metabolic triad physiology. Like, what is the relationship between adrenal, thyroid, pancreas? How does it progress? How do you read that progression? Where do you know how to intervene? So what are the common issues that occur within each triad? How does each of these relationships start to stack and then create more and more complex cases? And then develop a successful approach that unwinds these triad disturbances. And then, of course, understand key dietary strategies that will also support their benefit. So, what do you do? What do you recommend? And then, of course, the last is we'll get into some of the how do you improve your, the outcome? How does it help you to be able to assign and create corrective actions quicker for patients by looking at it this way? Our goal is for you to look at a lab test, write down where the imbalances are, know where to start by the end of the weekend. So you go back into your practice on Monday and you're ready to rock and roll, really evaluating your labs in a new light where they're interrelated. And even just looking at common lab values. So, the first thing is that the premise we take is that your metabolism is the sum total of all the chemical reactions that drive how a person feels today. And more importantly, it's the chemistry of where it's moving them in their future health or illness. So you're trying to be more predictive and relational. You're trying to look at where are the majority of the symptoms and the majority of the labs and their biometrics, clustering them for where you need to work. Do you need to work on the gut first? Because, old story, just begin at the gut and you can't go wrong. It's kind of okay, but you've probably been in a situation where, you got people on their yeast program, you're doing food elimination diet, and they just keep getting more and more food intolerances that you have to work through. And it's kind of like you're in quicksand working on their gut, trying to get it to get well. Well, if their gut is off due to the fact that they're under chronic stress and they're releasing a lot of histamine, well, then you never get to the bottom of how to calm their gut down and heal their gut. Now, that isn't always the case, but using this approach will help you to begin to connect those things so that you can follow the trail when you're not getting the results that you think you should be getting. So what are metabolic triads? It really as a way of explaining interconnectedness. Mark Houston talks about it a lot now. I think Mark was one of the first students in our program. So, in metabolic code, or metabolic triads. So, it captures metabolic weaknesses and orients where the biggest problem is, and it looks at the ability to optimize cellular health, decrease the negative forces on those metabolic processes. So you take the bad out, you rebuild the good. And then the other thing is that we try to group this information so that it's in 5 organ systems. So you'll learn about organ systems. One is thyroid, adrenal, pancreas. One is gut, immune, brain. The next is cardiopulmonary, neurovascular. The 4th is liver, lymph, kidney. And the 5th is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And these things relate to each other, right? If somebody's under stress long enough, their blood pressure can go up. So triad 1 can reach into the neurovascular relationship, the connection to triad 3, right? So stress can lead to blood pressure. Stress can lead to reduced vagal tone and heart rate. Autoimmune thyroiditis occurs when the immune system breaks down enough from signaling of either chronic stress, or maybe the gut's breaking down for another reason, but it's a triad 1, triad 2 relationship. So this is a way to start to explain things to people with the 5 main systems that go on in your body that allows you to explain it in a more simplified term. So triad 1, of course, is about energy production. It's about stress metabolism and how you deal with sugar. And when it's healthy, you feel vitality and you feel a sense of well-being. And when it's not, you feel day, erratic sugars that energy, focus altered. Maybe it's your thyroid, energy. Is the more this is disturbed, it's important to understand that the more this is disturbed, the less energy is being produced at a cellular level. As your mitochondria no longer using energy efficiently, and you start to produce energy at a rate of 2 molecules per ATP versus making a lot of pollution. There's a lot more free radical damage, a lot more lactic acid, it's cellular acidity that's developing, and that's triad 1. And triad 2 is immune brain, and that's about primary command and control. It's a fact that okay. Are you guys back? I haven't moved, and I lost connection.
Okay.
We're back now?
I can hear you now. Thank you so much. Yeah, we did lose you.
Okay. I wonder where.
I would say if you could just back up about 30 to 60 seconds, we'll be right back.
Oh, okay. So basically, we got through triad 1, and we're talking about triad 2. So the net of this is, guys, is that in triad 2, it's about the fact that your brain influences all other body chemistry, and that this concept of neuroinflammation, where the enteric nervous system is triggering inflammatory functions in the brain, and likewise, the brain could be triggering histamine and sympathetic overdrive in the gut. It's that relationship that we're trying to get under control, and that when the gut gets leaky, we don't filter well. When the gut we don't filter well, our immune system's defense network gets altered, and our ability to repair goes down. So this is where we kind of have the major physiologic interface with, literally with the external world, right? Because the epithelial cells are only 1 cell layer thick. The blood-brain barrier is only 1 cell layer thick, and of course the endothelium is only 1 cell layer thick, and we're trying to protect against all that. And when this is normal, you have a sense of feeling organized and secure, and when it's imbalanced, it's a feeling of being disordered and unpredictable. Think of the IBS person or the colitis person, or the person with anxiety. You never really know kind of how they're going to react. They're nervous about their world. So when this is out of balance, there's this disorder that takes place in the individual. The third triad, cardiopulmonary neurovascular, has to do about circulation and nourishment, right? It's like, how do I get oxygen and nutrients all over through my body? Am I building healthy red blood cells? Do I have enough B12 folate? Do I have enough iron? What's the synchronicity of the heart-brain connection? The vagal tonicity is what's the rhythm of my heart? What's my heart rate doing? Do I have good heart rate variability? It's the thought that as I get under more and more duress, my vessels get stiffer, my vessels get damaged, my ability to regulate rhythm of the heart and vessel tonicity gets altered. And this is kind of when people start to become more damaged, right? This is when their oxidative stress and inflammation is starting to affect their arteries and their whole neurovascular network. And so, this kind of is what, when you think about it, when it's normal, people have a strength of spirit, that that they feel, solid and balanced. They're not inflamed. They're not, think of the cardiac case, the male that's, agitated. And, we've heard all these studies, people that are type 1 personalities, or the men that are more agitated more frequently, or more prone to cardiovascular disease, of course, because it's affected by the fact that stress hormones and the release of cortisol and adrenaline has a negative impact on your neurovascular and cardiopulmonary network. And of course this is important because as people breathe more shallow, because the diaphragm gets stuck, they get sympathetic dominant, they don't oxygenate. So the pulmonary issues that come from that with high CO2, low oxygenation, start to come into play. So that's triad 3. Triad 4, of course, is liver, lymph, kidneys, and it's about detoxification and elimination. A lot of people tend to think about detoxification as liver and lymph only, and we realize that the gut's involved, we realize that the skin's involved, we realize that the breast's involved. But for the sake of telling a story to the patient, liver, lymph, kidneys are our main detox systems, and we're trying to make things more water soluble to go out of the kidneys. But if the kidneys are damaged, meaning that they're under a lot of oxidative stress, maybe you have very acidic urine, you're going to recirculate toxins. So in triad 4, we discuss the real metabolic processing and removal of toxins, how it impacts these other triads. And in fact, I think it's one of the more important triads today because of the burden that chronically is on individuals today. And of course, the fifth triad is that of sex hormones and precursors to sex hormones. And this is about feeling potent in the world and having self-esteem and, being better in our relationships, and it's just about the fact that we know when men and women have better hormone status, they feel better. It affects everything from their mood to their strength to their vitality to their sexuality, all to having physical signs or symptoms, obviously, when they're low in certain hormones. Or elevated, the ratios are wrong. So, we're going to have some great, for this triad, we've got Mark Philaday, who heads up the Whitaker Clinic and does a great job on hormones, as well as Ken Orbeck, who I love Ken because he has the perfect model. He does a lot of bioidentical hormones, and he has the perfect model for a small practice that's generating a very high yield, very good in business, and implements the triads. So it really helped him to become structured, ordered, and more get better return with his patients coming back to him, meaning that when he implemented the triads, he was getting better success. And when you get better success, people come back. So Ken's going to be teaching on hormones as well. Dr. Heyman, of course, Andy will be teaching quite a bit. And then we've got Doreen Saltiel, which if you haven't heard her talk about the cardiopulmonary neurovascular network and its effect on triad physiology, you really miss out. Doreen really has it down as a cardiologist. So what are we doing this for? It's because we're trying to manage this particular situation. We are trying to manage oxidative stress and inflammation in people. And we're trying to manage hormone balance for people, and we're trying to manage stress hormones in people, and we're trying to manage glucose and insulin for people, and we're trying to manage immune balance for people, and environmental burden, and we're trying to take into account a person's individuality. And that's what I think is the advantage when you begin to look at these networks, because you begin to see where the person is broke. Where do the labs and the symptoms show you are the person has the most issues? Start working on those. Get them feeling better. Get some wins. And then move on as you see fit. And this is, to make it basic, this is really what we're trying to get to, right? Is how we fix their sleep. What's their nutrition like? What's their digestion like? What's the microbiome like? What's their stress levels like? What's their toxin level like? What kind of medications have they been on? If you listen to some leading folks on hormones, they'll tell you that if you don't take into account the medications people are on, their environmental issues, their stress, sleep, digestion, and nutrition, and their exercise, it doesn't matter what hormones you put on. I mean, this is out of a leading Baylor School of Medicine's leading hormone research docs. So it's important to understand that what the triads do for you is it helps you establish a basis of reinforcing where the body is weak, so that for your strategies when you're using drug therapy, or you want to test for heavy metals, or you want to look for things like food allergy tests or organic acid tests, you've got solid footing on where the person's at and where they're going. And many times when you see what triad they're oriented at, it'll help you decide which one of the functional tests you want to be able to order, instead of just kind of having a scattershot effect. So for triad 1, just kind of give a few pearls on it. Adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, sustained fight, chronic fight or flight. A lot of people don't realize that look, all this stress comes from the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the adrenal glands, and it's the fact that when the HPA axis is altered, we make more adrenaline, we get in a sympathetic tone most of the time. So we're sympathetic dominant. We start releasing too much cortisol, and a lot of us have been trained in hypo and hypercortisolism and looking at it on a 24-hour clock, but realizing that, this is the biggest area of medicine since the beginning that medicine's been recorded, that adaptogens, or the plants that modified stress response, called the adaptogens, were the most revered plants in all of medicine. So that tells you that since the beginning of time, adaptogens like ginseng and rhodiola and ashwagandha and American ginseng, were highly valued because of their effect on the central nervous system in modifying stress response. And it brings this concept of allostatic load into bear. Why are we looking at allostatic load? Well, it's because allostatic load is more than just the psychogenic stress that goes on. It's the fact that you could have environmental burden. You could have vectors like Lyme or other viruses or bacterias, or it could be that you have iron overload, or it could be that you've got yeast overload, right? So it could be that you're mineral deficient, so maybe magnesium in particular, that your allostatic load, it's when your HPA axis is either overworked or fails to shut off after stressful events. So identifying how it's getting overworked and why it's failing to shut off, and then what you can do to reset it, is incredibly important. And then, of course, it's when the normal compensatory systems overreact, and that's, for example, PTSD. And this, to me, is a super important slide, because all of us get stuck on giving, we need growth hormone analogs, and we need testosterone and estrogen. And it's true, people feel better when they responsibly get their bioidentical hormones replaced, age appropriately. But it's the thought that if your free cortisol is elevated and your blood pressure goes up, and your free cortisol is elevated and your insulin action goes down, and you start to load more visceral fat, and your immune system starts to get more activated, and you stop budding new neurons, you can replace hormones all you want, but these other things will continue to happen. So it's important to understand the relevance of this interconnectedness, this signaling that's taking place, and then what to do to correct it, because the outcome if you look at this, osteopenia, sarcopenia, syndrome X, cognitive decline, immunologic compromise, and then fractures, frailty, and cardiovascular disease, memory loss, and infectious complications. These are the things of modern living. People are losing bone. When you lose bone, you plaque your arteries. We're all concerned about sarcopenia, right? Syndrome X, prediabetes, heart disease, prehypertension, memory loss. Obviously, all of these things are drilling down as a byproduct of a sympathetic nervous drive. And of course, this is what we're concerned about, is flattening of the cortisol curve. You've heard about it a lot. We want people out of this behavior, and this weekend we teach you how to help get people out of that behavior. And obviously, this particular study showed that when your flattest diurnal cortisol slope is flattest, you're 3 1/3 times more likely to have coronary calcification. And so this is a big issue to get squared away. And here's the other thing: you got to correlate this with things like pH, because low pH is associated with bone loss, and low pH is now, I think I have slides in here, associated with renovascular issues. And we kind of talked about this already, but obviously flattening of the cortisol curve increases interleukin-6. Why is that a problem? Because it causes you to get more leakiness in your mucosal barrier. So the big point is that so the HPA axis, when it gets altered, affects your lipids, affects oxidized LDL, affects adrenal function. So when we look here, that the adrenals are competing with thyroid for tyrosine, the adrenals compete with norepinephrine. So norepinephrine, epinephrine are being taken up to use the tyrosine, and so you don't have the tyrosine to make thyroid hormone. And then if it's an athlete, it even becomes more important, because under high stress, which happens all the time when people are working out, more and more people I consider athletes because they're working out a lot, they can alter their cardiac output as their T3 lowers, which this is a good example of exercise intensity and thyroid hormone. As thyroid hormone goes up, as percent heart rate goes up, TSH, T4, and free T4 levels stay the same, but free T3 and T3 go down. And this is important to note, because a lot of people who train at very high intensities and have been trained with their heart rate high, a lot of times end up with low T3s. Well, why is that a problem? Because you start getting heart enlargement when your T3 is low and you keep training hard. The next piece too, of course, is that as your thyroid is going down and your cortisol goes up, your insulin receptor no longer fires. 20% of your insulin receptors will be regressed when your thyroid is low, and cortisol turns off your insulin receptors via GLUT4 transport. Why is that a big problem? Because when you turn off GLUT4, you invite the body to use what's called the Warburg effect, or GLUT1 transport, meaning you're inviting glucose to passively diffuse more into the cell, so it floods the cell. You make a lot more lactic acid, and that's the beginnings of diabetes and cancer. And that's what this particular book was on. I got to write a chapter in this book, and this was all about the fact that as we get more metabolically dysfunctional, as we use glucose less efficiently, we invite things like intracellular acidity, hence acidic pH, but more importantly, we get into burning glucose and driving way more. And it's that old story of if I'm burning 38 molecules making 38 molecules or packets of ATP per mole, and now I'm down to 2. It's like you have to eat more. And so you tell diabetics to eat less, or you tell people you're trying to get them to get their weight off to eat less, and they look at you and they go, yeah, I can do it. But their body, because they're so inefficient in making energy, ends up breaking down. We have to figure out why, and that's what the triads help you to do. And this was really just, a slide that just shows that, more inflammation with blood sugar elevation. You guys know that. And then what are some things that you can think of that could be beneficial? Just quickly, this is another aspect of what we'll do over the weekend. We'll go into what herbs are the most important. For example, uricoma. Why is uricoma so important? Because it modifies the cortisol to free testosterone ratio. It dampens the central response so that more testosterone can be made both in men and women, and it helps to reduce cortisol. And it also acts as an aromatase inhibitor and a PDE inhibitor. So and then the next piece is that it helps with osteoblast proliferation, so bone density. So this is almost the perfect herb to fit that person who's under stress, acidic, losing bone, testosterone is dropping out, which is the kind of triad 5. So triad 1 and triad 5 working together. And you'll learn about these key nutrients that actually start to affect big areas of metabolic dysfunction in people. This was an interesting study that showed that, at 400 milligrams a day, both in men and women, that we had improvement in total and free test, a reduction in sex hormone binding globulin, but even more importantly, an improved muscular force. Phytotherapy research in 2013. This is an interesting study of 200 milligrams per day of 63 men and women. They had a 37% decrease in cortisol, 16% improvement in testosterone, but then quality of life symptoms got way better too. This was the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, 2013. And another study that showed that this improved libido, erection, sperm motility in semen in men. This is important because I see a lot of men who get under a lot of stress, especially athletes. They can't conceive. They think it's the woman. It's not. It's the men. So men can end up with, reduced libido, low sperm motility, and semen volume. And this is just a great, botanical for that. Cordyceps, another one that's really important. I love cordyceps. I'm just going to kind of go through this really quick. It improves oxygenation. Remember, as people are diaphragmatically breathing more shallow, they make more carbon dioxide. They have less oxygen. They're breathing more shallow. So this enhances oxygenation and helps to support kidney function. But more importantly, on this clinical study, 2010 clinical trial at 1,000 milligrams basically a day, the metabolic threshold at which lactate accumulates improved by 10.5%. That's really important. And then the last is that it buffered hydrogen ion increased by 8.5%. So this really increased efficiency of metabolism. So these are the things that you'll learn. I don't need to go through all of these. I just wanted to bring it up. Now, remember we said how cortisol upregulates IL-6. Well, when IL-6 gets upregulated, it increases Claudin-2 expression. Why that's important is that when Claudin-2 expression goes up, this goes into our second triad, you begin to disrupt the tight junction glycoproteins. So the scaffold protein cytoskeleton, that is the protein between two epithelial cells, gets disrupted under chronic stress. And this is the study that kind of went through that and showed that. And here's the pictorial of it. If you look at Claudin-2, see if I can get here. And we can see right here, right? So as my IL-6 gets upregulated, I end up stimulating one through PI3K, which I think is interesting. So this is the insulin activity and the action of PPAR, gamma, and alpha. So it's overstimulating. We end up triggering Claudin-2, and when this gets broken down, obviously people get leaky. They start to react to more dietary proteins. Okay, I guess I got to turn this off. All right, why isn't my slides going any farther here? Let's try down here. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Let's get rid of it. There we go. So this is basically saying, and this is where gut immune brain comes into effect, right? As I'm passing things through these tight junctions, I'm creating more proteins. Foods aren't being digested as well because of the chronic stress. Dietary peptides are getting through, triggering immune reactions, and that's why when we do these food allergy panels, now people are allergic to so much stuff. And of course, if you look at Bajani's work or obviously Fasano's work, there's a tremendous amount of interest in the fact that as we're becoming more reactive, as the gut gets leakier, we're driving autoimmunity, which of course is on the rise, as well as allergic disorders, eczemas, dermatitises, psoriasis, all these types of disorders that are getting triggered partly because of the immunopathies that are going on from the gut. And then the third, cardiopulmonary, this is, obviously the primary pump. This has to do with heart rate variability. It's the central driver, obviously, of physiology of what's going on with your heart and oxygenation. And, of course, the neurovascular aspect is the fact that we've got a single endothelial layer. It's the major biological interface, again, and that these vessels can get leaky, right? And so that vascular integrity is important. Balance of the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system are important. And understanding the mind-heart connection all is a part of this weekend, and getting you to have strategies. What do you give to redirect acetylcholine and parasympathetic nervous system? Realizing that when you're triggering inflammatory cytokines, you're down-regulating the cholinergic nervous system. And, this is just kind of the whole aspect of learning what are the big targets. Obviously, as a adiponectin goes down, we have problems with increased oxidative stress. You can almost look at adiponectin as a marker for oxidative stress. The higher the adiponectin, the lower the oxidative stress. TNF-alpha, IL-6, CRP, oxidized LDL. We'll discuss all of these in a strategy so that you begin to go, wow, how many things are going wrong? If you're somebody who's got a blood sugar of 95, or you're somebody who has a blood sugar of 95, and your adiponectin is low, and your C-reactive protein is trending high, and your oxidized LDL is high, and your LDL particle number is high, and your monocytes in your blood are high, and your GFR is low, that's a different blood glucose, right? Two people with a 95 blood sugar could have the same problem going on, but one has progressed a lot because they're producing a lot more insulin, damaging a lot more of their tissue. So what we're teaching in the triads is about interconnectedness and progression. These are endothelial cells, normal versus pre-heart attack. So if you look on the right, this is an irregular endothelial cell versus on the left, which is a regular endothelial cell. This is interesting that cells become irregular with multinuclear area only in acute MI cases versus controls. These are circulating endothelial cells. So the thought is these cells circulate, they're inflamed, and they're throwing off inflammatory compounds. And you know what? The more you can do to keep your endothelial cells not inflamed, good vascular health, healthy blood pressure, low heart rate, if you do an endopat, a healthy endopat, at least looking at the vascular rebound and looking at the health of the vessels. It's incredibly important in terms of overall health for the future of the individual. Obviously, it's important that we discuss, well, what are the factors that affect endothelial function? Well, lo and behold, we tie in all 5 triads as all having an influence on your blood vessels. And being versed at that allows you to explain blood pressure more thoroughly, and people get a more deeper understanding, because as you can see, endothelial dysfunction leads to all these other issues that we deal with all the time. CKD, prediabetes and diabetes, Raynaud's phenomena, hypertension, apnea, stroke and dementia, which of course can have issues, founded in things like, mycotoxins and Lyme and toxic metals. Now, at least we're finally seeing some research come out that people are believing. And then the obvious are things like erectile dysfunction and heart attack, heart failure, angina, peripheral vascular disease. So I guess this is part of the weekend. You start to see, and we'll do cases that will get more and more complex, because everybody doesn't come into you and the only thing they've got wrong is their blood sugar. The only thing they got wrong is their blood sugar and stress. You've got people that come into you that are stacked, and they may have stress issues but have gut issues, or they may have cardiopulmonary issues but they're insulin resistant and their immune system's on fire because their monocytes are high. And so it's understanding these relationships and how they connect. that allows you to start to put together a more efficient program. The fourth triad, of course, is cardiopulmonary neurovascular. Is liver, lymph, kidney. And once again, body has to detoxify every day, slow detoxification system, too many exposures over time, the system gets overloaded. People need to have a metabolic reserve, so they need to be able to not have the rain barrel effect where they overflow the toxins or metabolic intermediates that lead to damage and inflammation. There's a lot of markers that we'll go over in the weekend. One of the big ones that I like is low pH because it's linked to accumulation of visceral fat. It's linked to insulin resistance, to methylglyoxal, which is, of course, an advanced glycation end product. It's linked to hypertension, increased intrarenal oxidative damage, and the upregulation of renin and angiotensin. So urinary pHs that are low are a very simple way to evaluate where someone is going. Remember I talked about metabolism in the future? It's where is someone going? That's what we're looking for. So urinary pH, this is just a 10-year observational study on 350 participants that 8-deoxyguanosine is directly correlated to lower urinary pH and higher uric acid, and that is correlated to pulse wave velocity changes so that you get endothelial damage, and this was regardless of medications. So what this is saying is that even if you medicated and got the person's, you got their cholesterol down and you gave them a diabetes medication and their glucose got better, what they're saying is if you still have an acidic urine, and the big complaint on that, of course, is not have enough minerals, and that's correlated highly, low magnesium status and diabetes and heart disease. The loss of the bicarbonate buffering has been shown to reduce the need for dialysis, but even more importantly, intimal medial thickness is directly correlated to urinary pH. So we're going to teach you quick strategies to correct for pH. Now, we can't go into everything, but this also affects when you can detoxify someone or not. And this is another just study. I mean, we don't need to go through this again, but it's a predictive renovascular disorder model. I mean, literally just urinary pH has dramatic impact. But what do you do to correct the kidneys? That's the stuff that we go over. And these are the kind of slides that we'll go through, which is, the key kidney and the things you'll learn, the things you can take away, the key kidney remedies, the key liver remedies, the key lymph remedies. When do you use them? How do you apply them? And then, of course, Triad 5, the big thing here, this is kind of that thought of how Triad 1 imbalances can reach into Triad 5s. We all hear about the fact that high cortisol, low DHEA can alter testosterone and then alter insulin resistance, right? As your testosterone goes down, and of course, as that cortisol is going up, it affects insulin. And this, creates basically multiple hormone shifts. So once again, it's not enough just to give somebody testosterone and make them feel like $1 million again, right? You got to correct for the other triads so that you really get the maximum benefit. So I know I went through that pretty quickly because I want to get to at least a case study. I think I gave you a good overview of the 5 triads, how they relate, and the purpose is to create a simplified way of you explaining to the patient what's going wrong, and then to be able to order when it's appropriate for one functional lab tests or metabolic tests versus traditional labs. But I also want you to get a lot more out of your traditional labs, things like VEGF and myeloperoxidase and GGT. Urinary pHs, there's a lot of gold in data that you can get through a traditional lab that will show you where the person is going. And so I'm going to go to a case now and we'll go through this individual. And this is a 53-year-old male smoker, came with complaints of chronic anxiety, had a blood pressure of 130/90 medicated, heart rate of 88. He was about 30 pounds overweight, and a smoker. So midday fatigue, trouble staying asleep, perseverating. So let's see what he has. So right away you go, oh my gosh, he's got lipids, right? You look at his, his HDLs aren't that good, his LDLs are high, his trigs at 105 aren't ideal, but they're not horrible. But look at his C-reactive protein. Obviously he's a smoker, but then also look at his homocysteine at 13.2. So that's telling you something about what's going on with him. Right? There's some baseline things that are happening. His glucose is at 95. So we know that at that point, he has about a 60% risk of being a type 2 diabetic in the next decade. And his homocysteine is high, so we know he's probably accelerating damage into his kidneys. And we got, because his glucose is where it's at, and we know once you're over 90, you're beginning to get some renal impact, more oxidative stress, less blood flow, and we know that the folate levels, MB12 levels are probably off. And maybe you should test, maybe a future test might be for methylmalonic acid to see what's going on. And then his kidneys are holding up, his sodium is low, and his potassium is low. That could be indicative of the fact that he's beginning to get insulin resistant, especially because his potassium being low. Sodium's off because he's a business executive, he's pushing his adrenals hard, and he's now at the point of being anxious. And then look at his hemoglobin A1C at 5.6. So if you look at all this, before I even order any specialty labs, he's got a lot to work on here. Look at his free T3. He's medicated for thyroid. He's also has pellets. So, and he just got his pellets like 5 weeks ago when he did these labs. Now, the next piece to this is, so obviously, look, his hormones are optimized, right? His IGF-1 is kind of low. If you look here, IGF-1, 145. That follows the fact that his cortisol is probably off. And then let's take a look at his MCV is high. His red cell width is high. So he's, he is a normochromic macrocytic anemia, right? So he's, his B12 and folate are off. And then his, why did it do that? Let me see here. His luteinizing hormone is low, but of course, because he's on, he's on testosterone replacement. Look at his fasting insulin. It's at 10.7. Look at his monocytes and eosinophils. He's starting to trend a little bit. So he's starting to load up his immune system with what's going on. His white blood cells are starting to trend high. So in insulin resistance, we know that white blood cells go high, ferritin goes high, uric acid goes high, right, along with insulin. So a fasting insulin at 10 for me is, just way too significant. And then, of course, his vitamin D is optimized, good for him. And his estradiol is high, but probably relative to his testosterone, it's not all that high. And then let's take a look at what's going on in urine. The big one I want to show you is his cortisols. So if you look at his cortisols, he's low in the morning, but then low mid-morning, and he's basically low most of the day until he gets in tonight. But he's flattened his cortisol curve, and he's a smoker, and his LDL cholesterol is elevated, and his C-reactive protein is elevated, and his insulin fasting is a little too high. You see how he starts to add up? As we start to look at this, his stress levels are high and he's not sleeping. His blood pressure, even with medication, is elevated. So if you you can begin to see kind of where he's progressing. He's a triad 1, triad 3 person. And his, obviously because he's not sleeping, is a little bit of that brain going on. So for him, this could be a really complicated guy to try to figure out, well, where do I start? But if you order this into the triads and you see that his heart rate is high, his blood pressure is high, and that he's under stress, he's not sleeping well, his blood sugar is elevated, it becomes clear to see that we need to calm him down. So work on calming his nervous system down and getting his vascular network to relax, because he's a smoker. Yeah, it'd be easy to tell him to quit smoking, but that probably isn't going to happen, not right away. And then we've got to work on his adrenals, his blood sugar, and changing his diet to get his insulin resistance down. But when you get all this kind of data, you can start that we literally teach you how to order all this data in each of the triads to see where the person is loading up the most. He is a perfect example of somebody who the first 3 triads are all important, but you got to start somewhere. So, you know, you, through the discipline of going through his case, this is actually a patient of mine, and we went and did a lot of things like theanine and aged garlic extract, got his, gave him B vitamins to address his homocysteine, got his magnesium pull up at 10 milligrams per kilogram, and we teach you how to dose nutrients clinically. His blood pressure went down to 112/72. And he got changed to an ARB on his blood pressure med, and he started sleeping through the night about 5 nights out of 7. Now we're ready to start to work on his weight, his, the gut axis, and really working on the, the mucosal barrier, because we've already accomplished, in 4 weeks, we accomplished getting his blood pressure to come down, getting his mood to stabilize, getting his anxiety down. And so that, this is a, fairly sophisticated case where blood pressure is starting to be affected, and he's got lifestyle habits that aren't so good, right? He's drinks wine, not to excess, but smokes, doesn't get enough sleep, and is under a tremendous amount of stress as an executive. So I hope that this example kind of details for you the kind of cases, and this is an easy case to unwind. We'll get them where it's, like my person yesterday, they came in, they've got toxic metals, they've got mycotoxins, they're fatigued from being an athlete and overtraining, they've got, they've got all kinds of disturbances. But if you start to order everything and see where they load within the triad network, if the case begins to unfold for you as to what are the first, second, and third steps to take, and even if you're wrong, and maybe it was the second step you needed to take first, you'll be oriented at it because you'll see the effects of it. And I think this is one of the biggest issues holding people back, is that people can't tolerate spending a lot of money on a lot of labs. You want to focus your money on the labs, be more precise on the labs you need to cover. And you got to be more precise on the products that people take, because people in general, look, we may be zealots and might like swallowing a bunch of pills, but in general, people don't like to swallow a bunch of pills. They don't want to have 40 bottles to manage. If they have to, they will for a period of time. But believe me, I've been doing this 33 years. People really just want to fix what's wrong. And if we think that the only way to fix that is, by continuing to eliminate more and more foods and to give more and more products on people, we're not getting the right answer for them. So hopefully you'll find this program to be novel and inventive, and a way for you to model your patients so that you can quickly assess what's going on with them, create a targeted and individualized approach to that patient. And that's it.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight to learn about the metabolic triad. This course offers a breakthrough approach in clinical medicine that serves to organize complex patient care needs into a unified treatment approach, with which Dr. Wells did a fantastic job this evening. If anyone does have any questions, certainly use the chat option. Also, just wanted to let you know that if you are new to the Fellowship in Metabolic and Nutritional Medicine, or you have completed this in the past, this metabolic triad module is a perfect complement to your skill set. You will learn something new. You will meet with our expert faculty, having a very unique networking opportunity, and really gain some new protocols to better treat your patients. We also have a very special offer for those of you that are attending the webinar this evening. We are offering a $500 discount off the tuition of the Metabolic Triad Training. So certainly give me a call. My name is Lindsay. My direct line is 561-777-6807. And I'm just going to see if we have any questions. Oh, and this course will only be hosted live. This course is one of our courses that's not available online. It will be presented live in Las Vegas in August, the 11th through the 13th.
And I'm just going to reiterate, if you're really interested in a lot of cases and getting, a bunch of experts with a lot of years experience to kind of help you orient yourself on things, or if you're advanced and you just want to try and sharpen your skill set, I'm telling you, when people have come to this event, they love this weekend module, and I'm there the whole time. So I mean, I try to circling through, doing case studies, interacting with the patients. In Module 8 that we just finished, we had a very similar format. Students loved it. It's kind of where we got the idea for Module 8 on doing these kind of case studies. So if you're really into wanting to dig in, this is the weekend for you.
You're absolutely right. Dr. Saltiel, who is faculty and will be presenting, has done the fellowship, and she had let us know that the triad training was really where the entire fellowship all came together. For her, this course was the grand finale. Dr. Lavelle, do you have any final comments?
Nope. I just hope that we get plenty of people there for a turnout. We've put a great deal of work into it. And if you took this several years ago, information has evolved. So we continually update with the latest science and evidence in this course. So you can almost think of this as a way to get your advanced practice. Every year it's going to be there, and it's going to have the latest tips on the latest dietary supplements and applications and the latest shifts in what's causing metabolic problems in individuals.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Lavelle, for your time. We always appreciate it. We're so excited to see you in Las Vegas, along with everyone else on the webinar this evening. Please give me a call directly, 561-777-6807. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great night.
Have a good night, everyone.